Well, welcome everyone to this session of Talking Tours, where we're talking to Dr. Kristen Mann about Athens and Athens in depth and some of the joys that await you on a trip to Athens, particularly in January. So you may have heard about how Athens can be hopelessly crowded in July. So we're looking at it more in January, and we'll be talking not just about the main key sites that you may already know, but we'll be kind of talking about some of the, I suppose, the advantages of staying in Athens longer and kind of getting beyond those two or three things that we already know about in Athens. So thank you for joining us from Andros today, Kristen. So as a place to start, could you give us a little bit of background about your work and your experience in Greek archaeology?
Oh, thanks, Nick. In terms of Greek archaeology, it's kind of where do I start? I first came to Greece actually just out of high school, and I didn't know I wanted to do archaeology then. I was one of those people that thought that everything had been found and it had all been done until I came here and fell in love and just realized how much was still not really understood. So that set me in the direction. And pretty much as soon as I finished my undergrad, I took a year off between honours before doing my honours year to come and get some field experience. I wanted to make sure I liked the dirt side of things before I committed to anything. And yeah, I started with a field season in Cyprus and then went on to a survey on Evia and just fell in love here in Greece with the work. And since then, I've worked on so many different projects. Some of the highlights have definitely been Zagora, the site that I studied, which is an Australian-run project here on Andros. It's why I live here now, which I've been a part of since we first had our first renewed field season in 2012 after we finished there in 1974. So it was a big gap in field work to come back. So that was really cool. But working on Crete, I think, was one of just something out of this world. I was lucky to be working on the east side of Crete with an American project that's worked there for 30 years. So they're very immersed in the local community and there's a really strong dynamic and bond. So the archaeology was fantastic. It was this early city called Azoria, but the cultural aspect, I learned, we'd be digging by day and myself and the other trench supervisors, we were doing Cretan traditional Greek dancing lessons in the evening. Back then I could do 8 different Cretan dances. It was just wonderful. It was a wonderful field project to be part of. That was where I finally got my modern Greek. And another highlight was definitely working on the Keros project with Cambridge, with Lord Colin Renfrew and Michael Boyd and Evie Margaritis. That, for anyone who knows the Cycladic figurines, Keros was one of the sites where they were first studied and came from. So it's that early Cycladic culture. And the site that I was working on was a site just opposite where one of those special deposits were found called Daskalio. And it's this incredibly well built and engineered settlement connected to metalworking somehow and the rise of the early Cycladic civilizations that eventually becomes the Minoan civilizations. And yeah, that was magic. Going on a boat, you can only get to the island by boat, and you're sitting there with the morning sunrise over the Aegean, and there's dolphins, there's seals, there's turtles, and the archaeology is just next level. So yeah, in terms of highlights, there's other projects too which have their own charms and insights, but those I think were some of my big 3, I think I'd have to say.
Yeah, being able to kind of immerse yourself thoroughly in modern Greek culture as well is kind of a something you don't expect from archaeology, along with kind of going to work beside dolphins and turtles. It's kind of I can see something like a mosaic, kind of or a vase painting or something, kind of coming to life around you as you approach the shore.
Yeah, for sure. You understand the Minoan emphasis on marine life, very much so when you're in there.
Yeah. So when it comes to Athens and taking a group in Athens, is there a particular theme or focus that you wanted to bring out while in Athens?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different things and elements to highlight that I'd like to, but if I were to keep it at a general one, I think the 2 core areas. One is the intersection of the material world versus the textual evidence. This is something that Greek archaeology offers in a way that's very different to other places. We have rich body of evidence from the texts and the literature and the epigraphy, the inscriptions, but also the visual symbols encoded in sculptures and vases. There's their own semiotics in that world, as well as the physical material. And they tell very different stories. And the ability to query insights from one area of knowledge and test them against others, it's something that Athens can really demonstrate. So I think that really rich intersection of different media of communication and evidence sources is one thread.
And is that something that you find makes much more sense in situ rather than, say, try to teach that sort of intersection through in a classroom setting?
Yeah, very much so. It's why there's a really strong tradition of field schools and summer schools that have come to Greece, because you can study it and you can get a sense of even just the topography. You can hear about the mountains, you can hear about the Greece and its microclimate and its very strong regionalism. But until you get here, you don't really understand how come Greek history or the Persian Wars unfolded the way that they did. The development of a way of thinking and perceiving the world, the myths, it all needs to be very much embedded in the local setting, as well as going to the sites and realizing you see, whether forget sort of photos in books, but even just going to a museum and seeing architecture or sculptures or vases on display like artworks compared to the way that they were actually embedded in a physical landscape. Yeah, you kind of need to physically be there to get a sense of how people experienced these things and this information and this sort of significance. So yeah.
And in that sense, is it as a city that's not just doesn't have, oh, it's not an archaeological site only. It's been a living city for more than 2,500 years. Is that something that also feels very present, that you are kind of moving? There are different layers of time, different historical epochs interwoven in the city itself.
Yeah, yeah, and a sense of the way that the choices we make in what to preserve and what to showcase and how things kind of build and layer up. And Athens is a great place for that because they've got such a strong tradition of archaeology and pride in their archaeology, and they do what they can to preserve material. They've got so much. So you can go to a metro and you'll see all of the archaeological stuff on display. There's mini gallery spaces and signage and information at some metro places. You've got all of this in situ, and you can just see the crisscrossing of layers running through the city. So yeah, and again, the Acropolis. It's the famous area, but when you stand in Athens, and obviously it's so different where it's just this modern buildings everywhere. But Athens has got laws that prevent skyscrapers. There's laws on the building, the rise of how high you can actually raise a building. So you still get that sense of how much the Acropolis stood out in the landscape and dominated everything. So yeah, it's harder to get a sense of things like the ancient world and the fact that most of these places that are very urban were once farms and the city of Athens was very concentrated. But yeah, the landscape's really quite prominent and powerful here.
Yeah, and is that an aspect of Athens that particularly resonates with you? That kind of that sense that it has preserved that you, while you're there, you can get that sense of kind of, well, that is the Acropolis. There, it is something that's above you all the time while walking around.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I think there's also for me as well, because as I think when it comes back to the choices that people make, the things that are elevated heritage. This is the sort of the second theme as well, is kind of and Hellenic education, philosophy, ideas through time, and the role that that's played in Western education, but also identities, concepts, thinking. And you get that sense of, this in the physical city, but you also can see sort of some of the tension between the modern identity that's trying very much is sort of often stuck under the shadow of the classical past, and what it can offer and what modern Greek poets and artists and thinkers and culture is, with all its different elements beyond the classical, and it's this really, and sometimes it's quite physical in the landscape, but this tension as well between the different identities of Athens. It's a really dynamic city, and yeah, that's something that really resonates to me.
And is that something that comes out in some of the modern sites that you visit on with the group and the tour?
Oh yeah, the walking tour will definitely bring when we sort of do walking through the neighborhoods. But even in just some of the major settlements, or settlement sites, like obviously you've got the Acropolis and the fact that everything that was post-classical was stripped off. So it's harder to get that sense of this kind of layering of material history and identity through time. But the Acropolis Museum is very good at demonstrating what we know of different phases. They've got some great models that help you get a sense of the Acropolis and its different incarnations
Yeah.
through the eras.
So
And
what sort of ways did it change through the Byzantine and Ottoman periods?
I mean, you get like the conversion of anything which is a big sacred site. I mean, pagan sacred sites developed for a reason. They're very much connected to landscape, defensive areas, prominence. The topography plays a role. So all of the things that made that a natural setting for an ancient temple become really important for later religious purposes as well. So you had like the Parthenon being converted into a basilica and then into a mosque, and everyone kind of reclaiming. I mean, the fact that they wanted to convert an older building rather than just destroy it and rebuild is a really interesting topic. Um, so yeah, there's all these different elements, but also like the waxing and waning of the city's strength and wealth and population through time. Yeah, it's hard to get a sense of some of that, partly just because of, I mean, we can talk about that in a bit, but there's a lot of reasons.
Yes,
But
yes.
some sites show it better than others, and the ones that might not physically show it, like the Acropolis Museum's done a really wonderful job to kind of try to capture that changing material form of these major sites.
And in that sense, is the Acropolis Museum, I suppose, tell the broader history of Athens as a city and those changes, or is it just focused just on the
To
site?
a degree, but it's really focused on the Acropolis itself. It's one of the things that I love about that museum is it's got such a clear scope, and it's too easy to get overwhelmed in so many of the museums in Athens because most people often think of Athens from its classical side, but the richness of its prehistory, the richness of its later periods as well, its modern history, it's really quite impressive. So there's just so much. Whereas the Acropolis is a very specific site for a very specific purpose, and particularly its focus on the Parthenon building, the temple to Athena. Its displays actually really good. So you get those insights, but you've got this stability offered by anchoring it to a very specific site, and it's changed through time. And the Acropolis Museum is really well designed to showcase that as well. So yeah.
And I know it's a very complex topic, but how do how do you think the museum, how well do you think the museum does when it comes to sort of, it would be difficult not to, I suppose, mention the various works that are no longer in Athens,
Yes.
marbles, for example, which are quite contested. How does the museum handle those things, those
It's
aspects?
actually something that I really love about this museum. It was quite a controversial museum coming up in Greece. Many Greeks are very divided. You get people that love its very modern look, but you get a lot of people that resent it because to build it, it had to demolish some of the last remaining neoclassical buildings in the area. So they demolished buildings that are actually threatened, more recent history, to make it. But its choice of this reflective glass, its choice of a building that lets in a lot of light and offers this natural display, very deliberate. I mean, the whole thing is a campaign. It's a political act to make a statement for bringing the Elgin marbles back. And so as you approach the museum, you've got the Acropolis and specifically the Parthenon reflected perfectly in that mirror modern glass. It's really cool. the light lets you experience the reconstructed displays as though you're actually outside in an open air sanctuary, which is what they are. The way that they have it built is to showcase, they've got a reconstruction thing to sort of scale and dimensions of the Parthenon. So if they got those sculptures back, people would be able to actually experience them as close to in context as you could, where you'd get a sense of looking up at it from below, the way the relief sculpture brings that 3D aspect to life. I had the good fortune, my ex-husband worked at the British Museum, and I was able to go into the British Museum before opening hours. It was incredible.
Ooh,
And
fantastic.
yeah, but I'd been there a few times, but going there when it was empty, and I went in to get some photos of the Parthenon reliefs. And you don't really appreciate, or I hadn't appreciated it when you've got this crowd and you're kind of vying for attention to sort of see them. But as soon as everything's empty, you feel just how kind of wrong that display is. It's inverted, for instance, everything's facing inwards. So it's not on a sculpture facing outwards, it's facing the wrong way. It's brought down to eye line. So you're actually experiencing the sculptures in an entirely different way. It feels so contrived. Bit controversial for saying that. But yeah, the building is the architectural design and everything. There is so much thought and care, and it's quite compelling in the argument that it makes for this is where they should be. We have this place, this home for them. We would display it sensitively. It's connected to site. It's connected to legacy and modern identity. And this is the place where they should be. So yeah.
All those criticisms were or have been made about kind of would they be preserved properly? How would they be treated? Kind of the building and how it's created from what you're saying. Kind of,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different legacy ways of thinking that tie into some of those attitudes. But of course, the case in point that's always thrown back against it is the fact that early Anglo scholars for a long time thought that the Greek art was about the pristineness, the pristine white marble. And so the fact that they scrubbed the sculptures to clean them and they actually removed all the paint, all the evidence of the paint. So it's,
it's yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
It's very much different times, different eras. The time when Lord Elgin was there, it was a very different time to now. And it was when Greece hadn't been liberated as an independent nation. Once Greece reclaimed sovereignty, then you've got a very different discussion that needs to happen, as well as now that it's got this very capable modern display. So yeah, it's a really complicated topic because it's fraught with all of the what was legal then versus what's the ethical right thing to do. If we start changing and giving these back, what will happen to everything? But there's a few museums that are doing really good work, being very proactive at repatriating artifacts back to places where they belong. Even ones that were obtained legally, they're recognizing that there's a place where they should be. So it's an evolving discussion and situation, shall we say? So
probably, I suppose, not a discussion that has a quick fix overnight or anything like that, which is a bit too.
No, and I'm trying to respect the fact that there are multiple sides here. But I think in this case there is a very strong the relevance of those sculptures to that particular site and to the modern nation of Greece as well as to their heritage. It's so fundamental, and this is a key thing too. Is the changing when I talked about the saliency of Athens and Hellenic culture and education. Some of it might be a construction. It might be people often argue that it's a bit contrived or people are forcing or kind of elevating and as part of a kind of campaign. I think you kind of can't be that cynical about it, that all identity is a bit of a construction, but there is the role of the ancient world in the formation of the modern state is really fundamental. You can't talk about the Greek Revolution without talking about the Philhellenes and the movement for classical education and the classical scholars that played a strong part throughout Europe in getting support for Greece. So yeah, Greece as a nation was forged from its past very much so.
And it's a past, as you mentioned as well, it has an extraordinary influence across Western Mediterranean culture and beyond, which is,
Yeah.
I suppose, part of the joy of going to a city like Athens. And you've mentioned as well that kind of it's not just the classical past; it's pre-classical past as well as its post-classical past. And is it that breadth of the history of the city and the archaeology of the city that leads you to include, say, 2 visits to the National Archaeological Museum?
Very much so.
Yes, yeah,
The National Archaeological Museum is overwhelming. I love archaeology and art, and I love museums, and I get exhausted trying to squeeze it in one time. I get overwhelmed. Just even trying to go to the gallery with all the vases. It's just, I mean, especially for someone who studied it, you're like, oh, we studied that. I recognize that. And it's just got everything. But yeah, there's such a wealth of material covering so many different topics that, it's honestly, to go in there and walk around for hours and try to squeeze it in one day is physically exhausting, mentally overwhelming, and the information just goes in one ear and out the other. And it's very difficult to do justice to the pre and post classical history as well, which is there in the National Gallery, even though dominated by the classical side of things, the archaic and classical, but it is there. So yeah, it's just much better to break it up.
yeah. And for the non-classical parts of the collection, do you have a particular favorite area in that collection?
Oh, well, I'm an early Iron Age person, so I love some of the geometric material, but really my favorite is the early prehistory. I love the displays that you walk in and you get hit with the Mycenaean gold masks, straight as soon as you walk in. But the Mycenaean rooms, but they've also got the prehistory on display as well with all of the domestic material. It's just that single area has got some really well curated displays and so much content. I could spend just a few hours in that little front sort of space for sure. So yeah, that's always, it's just a really well displayed gallery. So yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yep. I imagine too that like we were just earlier while developing the tour with my colleague Mark. There's
Sorry,
the
I missed that. Sorry.
is that also, I was thinking as well, like while developing the tour with our colleague Mark, there was the kind of, well, if you're down near Nafplio, then it's a reason to be able to go and see some of those earlier sites, the Mycenaean sites, for example.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's Mycenae is one where you can read about the engineering that they did, but until you get to Mycenae and see the size of those stones, the ashlar masonry that they used to build the fortifications and some of the Tholos tombs, it's just, yeah, you're really blown away by the fact that thousands of years ago, people had the engineering to understand physics, geometry, but also logistically to carve and move the stones as well. Yeah, so it's really something else. And to see it in the landscape as well. But it's really important. So much of what we speak about with Greek culture, when people talk about Greek history, Greek attitudes, Greek philosophy, Greek ideas, it's Athenian and it's not the rest of Greece. Democracy was a bit of an anomaly, actually, in terms of political organization. We talk about Greece as the creator of democracy, and this is something where it's so important to modern cities, Western cities. But yeah, Athens was weird. Athens was very weird. So it's important to get outside as well. And so in Mycenae, you've got Mycenaean Tirons, but there was the major city-state of Argos in that region as well. And their attitudes and their beliefs, there's overlap. There's lots of overlap throughout Greece, but there's still very, very different cultural traditions and social attitudes. And yeah, so we talk about Greek, but we often mean Athenian.
Yes,
So,
yeah. So
yeah.
towards the end of the tour, then you kind of get that contrast, or with say saying kind of a Mycenaean or Argive, and then but also Corinthian culture as well, or what remains from
Yeah, and
ancient
the
Europe as
Venetian
well.
history too. Nafplio is one of the best preserved Venetian sites, and it almost was the modern capital of
Really?
Greece.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, Athens was chosen because of its classical heritage. So that was, Athens back then was this like rural backwater. There was farmers grazing sheep and very few in the way of urban. There was not an urban city there. So the entire city was literally constructed as part of reforging Greece as a modern nation. So it's interesting to see some of the past that might have been, but also some of the different threads that pull on Athens and the choices that were made about what modern Greece, not Athens, sorry, gosh, I just did it. Athens is Greece. No, it's not. But what modern Greece would be, what shape would modern Greece take? So, yeah.
And is there much left from that period from or in Nafplio when it was there kind of some development towards modernizing it as a city, as a modern capital, or was it
It's
just
very much retained its, sorry, I get excited and jump in.
oh,
It's
go
very
ahead.
much retained its Venetian feel, actually. It's one of those, Athens, it's hard to sort of feel that. You've got the concrete modern city, sidewalks, modern buildings everywhere. There's a lot of the ancient sites and ruins are littered throughout it and they're integrated through, but because there wasn't that really strong established city, you don't get that sense of the different, more recent sort of from medieval into modern, early modern heritage. It doesn't have that same European flavor, shall we say, of other cities throughout Europe. But Nafplio does. You've got the cobbled streets, you've got the buildings, you've still got one of the best gelato places in Greece. It still has that Venetian tradition there. But with the Castro and the castle and the harbour, it's a really wonderful place, Nafplio. It's one of my favorite sites, actually. I love going there.
Yeah, and kind of would be a fantastic contrast with Athens as well, going from a modern metropolis to then a perfectly preserved Venetian town from 500 years ago.
Yeah, it is. It's really it's very different, but also you can sort of get a sense too of some of the limitations that Nafplio would have had. Some advantages, but others that were different. So yeah, I mean, the really fascinating one about Athens in particular, stark contrast between them, both naval capitals from naval
Yeah,
empires. But Nafplio is right on the harbor. It's right there. Whereas Athens was separated from Piraeus. It actually has several kilometers. It's quite far away from its harbor. And so in terms of being able to look at the way that they fortified access to the harbor, the way that they maintain their naval empire, but it still has that space and the space for a modern city to sprawl out as well. So I'm kind of glad Nafplio is preserved the way it is. It's very different.
a different slice of Greece's history to see.
Yeah. Although I haven't been there in winter, I'm interested to feel how it feels in winter. I've mostly been there in spring or autumn. Spring's fabulous in the Argolid. You've got all of the citrus blossoms blooming and it's wonderful. But winter, I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the kind of cozy feel of Nafplio in the evening. So yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I'm just thinking of places in the evenings. Are there particular areas of Athens that you prefer to go to in the evenings for their vibe?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because this is one that's been changing. I mean, I lived pretty much in Athens. I was there for a year in 2012, and I was there. I wasn't officially living there, but I kind of stayed as long as I could really throughout 2013, 14, and 15. So I was there for much of that time. And back then, the heart of everything was Exarchia. It was kind of like Newtown in Sydney. It was where there were this thriving community of artists, but also it's often was presented as kind of dangerous because of you've got it's like this rite of passage. I don't know. It's like the people who kind of lean more left when you're a teenager, you go and join the anarchists. The people that lean more right, that you've kind of joined the riot squad, and they have this like guerrilla urban warfare. That's their sole purpose in life, and that's what they do. But it was one of the most surreal experiences is to be there while they're there having one of their little fracas kind of interactions, and everyone's just sipping raki at one of the little meze places. There's grenades and smoke sort of going off like, around the corner, and everyone's like, oh, they're just doing their thing.
I
So it's a
imagine that would have
weird.
been at its peak after the problems after the global financial crisis.
Yeah, the
Well,
financial crisis. I mean, this was I lived in Greece through the financial crisis, witnessing its impact on the urban area in Athens, but also in Crete. I was at Azoria in Crete when they had the referendum to vote no to austerity measures under Syriza, and watching the slow strangulation from the austerity and the crisis. It was a very different experience, and seeing how much Greece was misunderstood was definitely something else. But in terms, I mean, that's a sort of more sober topic. But coming back to the nightlife, the food, the bars, the cafe culture it was actually quite safe. As a young woman, I could walk around very late at night and be fine. But now, actually, one of my favorite areas is a new area called Kypseli, which is not as well known. It's kind of bizarre to visit because it's an old area. It was like the jazz center of the sort of wealthy elites in the 20s, 30s, sort of, and
oh
then
wow.
everything moved further out. So it's got this really beautiful Art Nouveau buildings. But it kind of had a decline, and now it's kind of coming back as Exarchia, like Newtown, became very gentrified, and all the artists and poor students have moved out to the fringes. And Kypseli is where a lot of the migrant families are. So it's one of the few multicultural areas in Greece, in Athens, which is truly multicultural with, all sorts of interesting, there's like African dance movements and stuff happening on evenings. You've got Syrian and Afghanistan refugees. You have people from all over the world mixing in this really vibrant culture. So Kypseli's got a really cool energy as well. But I'm also a sucker for the heart of Athens. I love the Plaka region. I love the National Gardens. There's still anyway. So yeah, I could talk about all of them, but the neighborhoods are very dynamic, very
Oh, I
dynamic.
think you're giving us a great sense of just how distinct the different neighborhoods of Athens are. That's
Very much.
more than just the old center coming down from the Acropolis. That there's
Yeah.
all
And
this
it's one of the
vibrant.
reasons to be in Athens. If you just sort of do a flyby, I mean, it's hard to get a sense of all of this anyway, but it's also too easy to be distracted by the kind of concreted modern exterior. But Athens has got this really strong, vibrant, creative scene, and the different neighborhoods, the different ideas. Greece has a free public education system, so the level of education in Greece is huge, and it's you need to kind of settle in and get a little bit of a feel for that area beyond the tourist focus spaces. It's too easy to kind of be put off by things like the graffiti and the modern concrete buildings and stuff, to miss those deeper cultural currents that exist in the modern city.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And is there any, if you're looking for, say, modern and contemporary Greek art, there are a couple of philanthropic museums or kind of museums that have their
oh,
origins in
very much so.
philanthropy. Is that part of a long tradition, or is that relatively recent? Those kind of the appearance of this is a philanthropic collection that's been brought together, but public access has been created.
Yeah, the public access is something which is changing and expanding and evolving. But philanthropy has been a huge part of Greece's heritage, including from foreigners, throughout a lot of wealthy American English people who very much were raised and educated and loved the classical education. So getting the funding for researchers outside of Greece to be able to go. I mean, my entire career has been basically funded by philanthropy. The Australian Archaeological Institute at Athens was a philanthropic creation, and it's continuing in that way. But also research grants. There's such a bottleneck of public funding for researchers, especially because people see archaeology as a bit, everyone loves the excitement. They love the Indiana Jones romance, but pay it, and does it meet the national litmus test for national relevance? This kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, in Australia, postgraduate funding, there's a huge bottleneck and it's getting smaller. So philanthropy is the only way to get the researchers outside funded. But in terms of Greece itself, Greece has, I don't know whether it's the strongest tradition, but it's a really powerful, strong tradition. Sorry, that's my phone. Please ignore me. Sorry about that. So sorry.
That's
My
okay.
dog really wants attention and she was right underneath me. So yeah, there were particularly, Greece is a really interesting place of contradictions. There's lots of contrast and juxtaposition. And so there's been a lot of poverty in Greece's history from when it was created, and even like with the economic crisis and the ordinary people struggling, but there's also a huge amount of wealth. And Greece, still, I think today controls about 25% of the world's shipping. It's a substantial proportion for a small
Yeah.
modern nation. In that's even after I think it's been selling off infrastructure to outside interests to help repay debt. So those big shipping companies and families that took pride and love and had their collection and fostered local artists. I mean, some of the Greek surrealist artists are really incredible. And when you read their writings, you realize surrealism wasn't a very radical flip from some of the Greek ways of seeing the world. It's really interesting to see how this very organic natural evolution kind of happened. So yeah, this pride in their nation and their artists and their heritage created these amazing collections, but also this belief in bringing those to the world. So here on Andros, the museum was organized and paid for. There was Professor Alexander Kambidoglu played a role in seeking the philanthropy and convincing the Goulandri family to donate it, but it was funded by the Goulandri family. And there's so much material. It's a huge crisis in Greece right now, actually, is the sheer amount of material that is brought out of the ground and where do you put it? And how do you pay for it? How do you pay for the guards to protect it? Because as long as we keep selling antiquities, we put a price on them, those become worthwhile, and it's a huge issue with needing to actually protect the heritage. And the Greek government can only do so much. So whether you're talking archaeology, whether you're talking the art collections, there's so much that's still hidden in private collections all around the world that we don't get to see. But Greece has a very strong tradition from its early origins as a nation, modern nation, of actually having philanthropy, and whether it was generating collections, whether it was donating material. The Benaki museums are another classic
Because
case
I
in
was
point.
thinking about that. That's an extraordinary number of museums for.
Yeah.
Is it a single Benaki Foundation, or have they?
Yeah, I've just got goosebumps actually thinking about it.
Yeah.
Their collection is incredible, and it's unique for its time in that it wasn't just focusing on the classical heritage. It had this holistic thing. So you've got the Islamic Banaki, which if you ever want a really good coffee and a place to view the Acropolis, their cafe at the top is Sunset. It's the best place to be. But the Islamic Banaki is incredible. And to actually take an interest and preserve the Ottoman heritage and the Islamic heritage is kind of radical for the time, as well as the modern traditional costumes and garb and the history. It's a very full representative collection, and yeah, it's incredible. So
And when you've got a few hundred years of an Ottoman presence, and
yeah,
the influence on things you're saying, like on garb, on folk culture as well, that there's the kind of a. It is great that somebody has systematically preserved that, and that it's visitable.
yeah.
Yeah. So of the range of the Benaki's collections, kind of which do you think are their strongest, at least, or their best presented?
Oh,
That's a tricky
oh my
question.
gosh, pin me down. That's really hard.
You know,
So
throwing you on the spot.
yeah, it's really hard. I mean, the main Benaki Museum is really good. It doesn't have this huge number and volume of other museums, but the pieces it has are actually really, really significant and well displayed. But the fact that you can go through and have, as you move through the different levels, move through time is really cool. I do have a soft spot for the Islamic Benaki. A Cypriot Australian woman took a tour through there. She's a friend of mine, and her passion was the Byzantine and Islamic history. Something that was really undervalued for a long time. It's why we know so little about the Christian heritage of Athens, was because everything that was later was ripped through and removed to get to the classical stuff. So research, 19th century research interests and 20th century research interests did a lot of destruction of the material, not just, you know, the Visigoth invasions and Alaric or, you know, the Heruli or whatever. It's, yeah, the modern archaeologists played a role. So she just had this really, she gave me a really good tour. So I'm not sure how much of my sense of the Islamic Benaki as a really powerful connection came from the collection itself and how much from her really exceptional tour. I don't know.
But it is great to be able to see those other and come to understand those other aspects of Athens's very long history, as well as its kind of that contemporary evidence that you've pointed to at the beginning. Is it's there, and you can feel the interaction between the past and the present, between a literary Athens and a material Athens, and a kind of an artistic,
very much
the political Athens, all in one.
They are one of the best places to do that, as well as all the little ethnographic. They're always very small, but they're really, really well done. These little ethnographic museums scattered in villages around Greece. But yeah, the Benaki was one of the places where I first encountered and realized there was so much more to Athens than what we focus on.
Excellent. So just I think if anybody has any questions for Kristen, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we've got time to answer those. So just thinking, are there kind of any particular preconceptions that you think people have of Athens that you think are best to kind of draw attention to as preconceptions and not the reality of being there?
I mean, there's probably a lot. It's kind of hard to actually sort of think on that. I need to kind of go back to some of my preconceptions as well. You know, before I went, like, obviously the focus on classical Athens, kind of thinking that it's a one-show pony, is one. Recognizing though too that for all of those amazing photographs of sites that are very selective, then you've got I'll put that in the text for you. Yeah, it's Kypseli. It's called the Beehive because I don't know if I can send that through here. Yes, I can.
The name, how to spell the jazz area of Athens.
So it's not the jazz area now, although one thing I do love, side segue, sorry, Nick, is
that's right, go right ahead.
Athens has some amazing bars that are niche. Like you can go and find jazz bars, blues bars, rock bars, rockabilly, different bars. And it's incredibly sort of rich music and heritage. My uncle used to run a blues bar until the crisis wiped it out, and it was so much fun. It was incredible. And the live performances you can get. But anyway, yeah, so Kypseli isn't like a jazz neighborhood now. It was one of the wealthy, educated areas earlier. It's got an interesting history. But yeah, it did kind of have that flourishing in that era, which captured sort of the jazz and the Art Nouveau movement and all of that as part of the culture. Preconceptions though is what we were talking about. So yeah, part of it is the classical for sure. There's just so much more beyond it. Part of it is though that selected tourism photos that can make you part of it is that you got to expect Athens is a modern city. It's a modern city from a poor nation. So it's a lot grungier than people expect. And that can be quite shocking when you get there, and people struggle to see past it sometimes, which is a shame because, you know, it's part of the modern history. It's an interesting discussion too about the EU and the areas of its strengths and the areas where it falls, and the different tension between the cultural EU identity versus the economic EU, which was created for certain things. And Greece is a place where that plays out very clearly in the landscape. So yeah, do expect it to be a lot grungier than you might recognize. Another preconception, of course, is pristine marble, white sculptures everywhere. The Greeks loved kitsch color. Like there's this fabulous photo. The Americans, being American, did a 2-scale replica of the Parthenon in Nashville. So you
Okay,
can go
not
there.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's no, not Las Vegas, but it does. It's funny. This photo I'm thinking of, I use it in my first year lectures when I'm talking about it. It's a bit weird because it's flat, so the temple looks heavy and squat when it's not elevated. It's on a flat landscape, but they've done a very subdued decoration. They've toned down the color scheme so they're like paler reds, paler blues and it's very sort of sensitive, but you can rent it out for weddings. And one of the photos I had the temple, this gold temple of Athena Promachus that's been reconstructed inside this Parthenon. And it was lit up with bright neon pink and it's gold and bling and it's totally tasteless. And when you show it, it's like, of course, the Americans did that as a bit of a joke, but then it's like, but the Athenians would have loved that. If they could bling out in that way, if they could bring in neon lights and have a full disco vibe, they probably would have really loved it. The colors were really vivid and vibrant. The sculptures were decorated with gold and bling as well. There's little piercings for them to have
Yeah,
diadems. Yeah, it was gaudy. It was really gaudy. So
and you can
that's another
imagine a
big
way it would
description.
have caught any light inside on the sculpture, and you'd be able to see all
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a shame that some of the sculptures that they don't have, there's a couple that have replicas, but to be able to get that sense as like an en masse shining metals, bronze, gold, silver, as well as the colors, which of course, because much of the displays are far away, so to catch the eye and articulate details and communicate whatever they wanted to communicate, you need the colors to augment that. So yeah, the
yeah,
coloration of Athens is really cool. There's some great digital reconstructions that you can sort of find online, 3D models and stuff, where they've reconstructed the color scheme from what we can work out from paint remains
yes, yeah,
that the Brits didn't wipe off.
yeah. And I wonder as well just about the I suppose the culinary culture of Athens. Is
Oh,
yeah, it's much diversity within Greek cuisine, contemporary Greek cuisine today, or is there kind of other influences coming in?
I mean, diversity from an Australian perspective, no.
Yeah,
You know, we are so lucky in Australia for the diversity that we have. Um, but there is a difference in the regional culture and cuisine. But so much of what Greek food is this nostalgia, spitiko, home cooked food. It's what grandma made, and Greeks will go to different restaurants that all serve the same things, and they'll be discussing just how particularly good this thing was or this thing was. But Athens is an area where you've got more fusion, and I spoke about the migrant community that is growing. When I first went to Athens, it was shockingly monocultural, like shocking to be on a metro and realize I'm different and everyone else is the same. It was um, really sort of bizarre. You expect, like I expected that when I went to Japan as a kid, and but Greece just shocked me for some reason. But that's changed. That's changed, especially with the Greeks embracing so many of the refugees from the Syrian war and different things like that, even though they had no money to do so, but they still welcomed them. So yeah, you are getting some really interesting fusion restaurants happening. You're getting modern takes on Greek food that sort of fits a little bit with that, the nouvelle cuisine kind of fresh sort of Californian vibe that Australia really has kind of embraced and sort of run with our Asian fusions as well.
yeah.
Asian food is just starting to hit the scene in Athens. It's still not quite up to Aussie par, but you can get Thai food now, which was something you couldn't find before.
Wow,
So
it's yeah.
you can get ginger in supermarkets. This is a new thing. But
So
no, I love Greek food. Greek food is more than the food, though. The entire experience, everything. It's one of the things I love the most about Greece and Athens is the emphasis on community and people and maintaining your people relations. So food and drinking, it's very much frowned on to be drunk and staggering through the streets. You don't see anything like, Oxford Street in Sydney or, King Street, sorry, or George Street. What the gosh, I've been away from Sydney for so long. But the place where all the pubs are and everyone who's 18 goes there and there's
King's
sweaty, beer
Cross.
smelly kind of people. Yeah,
Yes,
you don't get that is very much frowned on because you drink and you eat over a long time. You share these communal meals. Everyone gets to have these tastes of all the different flavors and all the different things. You get your village taverna wine, which you order by the kilo, by the liter. You order a kilo of white wine and a kilo of red wine, and you take your time. You don't get hurried out of restaurants, even the fanciest ones. You're there because food is not just eat and go away. It's the social, convivial discussion afterwards. Restaurant owners love it when you stay and clearly having this really connected, engaged conversation. It's one of my favorite things about Greek culture, actually. It's something people often shame Greece for, seeing them as like not working hard enough or whatever because they take their time over a meal. But to me, it's about priorities. Their priorities are family and friends and connection and the humanness of life. So yeah, I really love that. It's
something as well. It seems like it connects right through Greece's past into its deep history as well, with that focus on
yeah, it's changed a lot. Oh, I didn't
hospitality.
mention either though the different regional things. Like you get a lot more spiced flavors up north in Thessaloniki. There's a stronger connection there to like some of the trade routes that we're crossing through. Cretan food is different again. Cretan food's my favorite, I have to say. It's one of my favorites. But they are connected, some of those earlier attitudes, but so much of it is actually really baked into more recent history and strong Balkan traditions as well. It's really fascinating, but that village-based life is fundamental to Greece still, and it's very much one of its charms is that connection to people and place and the journey rather than just the destination, shall we say. It's yeah, it's really cool.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us about the different sides of Athens, the different sides of Greece, acknowledging that kind of there's more to Greece than Athens. And I think you've opened our eyes to a range of just that Athens is a place with many, many histories, many very different districts and neighborhoods, each with their own history, as well as that kind of those contrasts between kind of Athens and places like Nafplio and being able to see things in Athens and then go to the sites related to those objects outside the city as well. So, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh, I should remember before I do, for anyone who's, when you come on the tour, a little warning about Athenian sidewalks, they are super slippery. So just make sure you bring good shoes. Sorry to interrupt right at the end, but
No,
they
no,
are
thank you
dangerous.
yes, no, thank you for reminding us. It was something we were talking about before the session started. Is the slipperiness of marble.
Yes, I
How it looks
did want to
beautiful
sort
but
of put that
different, but you
through.
need good grip.
Sorry to end on that note, that very practical mum note.
And it's January, so maybe pack a scarf too.
It can get cold. People don't realize that Athens can get quite cold. It can snow in Athens. In fact, it snowed several times seeing the Acropolis in snow. It won't snow in January. Snow is normally a February thing sometimes. But Athens in winter is marvelous. It's actually my favorite time to be in Athens. It's a much more relaxed city. It's cozy and it's intimate and it's full of life. And it's when people are at university. It's when people have worked incredibly hard for the summer and they're back recuperating. People are engaging with things like their art, their hobbies, their other work, and they're settled into a groove. And Athens at winter is just one of my favorite times. It's really magical. So it will be cold. Do bring warm gear, but it's you feel like you've been invited into the community much more in Athens rather than being an outsider looking in. So in wintertime.
Which is a great reason to go in January as well.
Very much so, yeah.
Well, thank you again and also for being up early in Andros. So it's still
You're
only
welcome.
mid-afternoon in Sydney, and kind of I'm sure some of the warmth of the sun coming through, I think, is something that others in this part of Australia would be appreciating some of right now as well.
Yes, I'm actually going to have to go close my blinds because it's about to get very hot. So
excellent. Yeah, well, thank you again. And kind of, if anyone has any questions for Kristen or about the itinerary, please feel free just to get in touch with us. Thank you all.
thanks, Nick.